Man, I swear, bro, look at my wife, but you so beautiful. You know what I'm saying? But you all in the bag of chips. Doritos, man. Frito-Lays. Look at my wife. Check out that long, pretty hair. You know what I'm saying? That's that real deal Puerto Rican princess type shit. Look at the glasses. Check out. Oh. Hey, look, I bet y'all can't figure the name of them motherfuckers. I goddamn me. You know what I'm saying, babe? Look at my, oh, she got the Uggs on. The sliders. You know what I'm saying? Check out. Look at the camo denim. That's how we do it. Yeah. I swear I love this. For real, I love this. Kings, I love her too. Check out softball beast. You know what I'm saying? Hey, look, this the, hey, look, I ain't gonna lie, this is the only junior high schooler I slam dunk the fucking ball. You know what? It's just in her jeans. You feel me? It is what it is. Trick pick, sports bet king 101. You know what I'm saying? Remember that. It's family over everything.
At precisely 4:35 a.m. on March 30th, 2025, a distress call was placed to emergency services from a calm residential neighborhood on Ronmar Drive in Alexandria, Louisiana. The caller described the sound of gunshots and reported what appeared to be a domestic dispute. Officers from the Alexandria Police Department were promptly dispatched to the location. Upon entering the single-family residence, law enforcement discovered the bodies of two individuals, both deceased from apparent gunshot wounds. One was a 38-year-old woman identified as Shaterica Danielle Smith. The second was a 42-year-old man named Tracy Johnson, who appeared to have died by suicide after allegedly shooting Smith. What initially appeared to be a routine disturbance call swiftly escalated into a serious investigation. With no signs of forced entry, no witnesses at the scene, and few immediate clues, detectives began piecing together the final moments that led to this double fatality. The case was preliminarily categorized as a murder-suicide, with Shaterica as the homicide victim and Tracy as the alleged perpetrator. But what happened behind those closed doors? The truth is rarely simple. This tragedy wasn't born in an instant. It likely built up over time. Was this a sudden outburst or something long premeditated? What circumstances unfolded in the days or even months before this deadly conclusion? The home that once stood as a symbol of ordinary domestic life had now become the focus of a police investigation. Yellow crime scene tape encircled the property as forensic experts began their work inside. Who exactly was Shaterica Danielle Smith? What kind of relationship did she share with Tracy Johnson? Were there any red flags that could have predicted this outcome? This isn't merely a tale of a tragic death. This is a story that delves into the often invisible warning signs of domestic abuse and control. It's a narrative of unanswered questions and haunting silence, and it demands closer examination. Let's walk through the facts. On that early morning of March 30th, Alexandria police were dispatched to the 5900 block of Ronmar Drive following a 911 call that reported a possible domestic violence incident involving gunshots. Upon arrival, patrol officers entered the home where they encountered a deeply distressing scene. Both residents were dead. The first victim, 38-year-old Shaterica Danielle Smith, was found with a fatal gunshot wound. Nearby lay the body of 42-year-old Tracy Johnson, who investigators believe shot Smith before turning the firearm on himself. Both individuals were declared deceased at the scene by responding emergency medical personnel. Standard crime scene procedures were initiated immediately. The area surrounding the home was secured with police tape, and access to the residence was restricted while detectives and forensic teams began collecting evidence. No physical evidence of forced entry or a struggle was immediately visible. A handgun believed to be the murder weapon was recovered near Tracy Johnson's body and sent for further analysis. Authorities reported no indication of a third party's involvement, and no other individuals were found inside the home. The two bodies were located within one of the central areas of the house, consistent with close-range gunfire. Based on early assessments and statements gathered at the scene, detectives proceeded with the assumption that this was a domestic-related murder-suicide. As the investigation unfolded, neighbors were questioned. Some acknowledged hearing what sounded like gunshots, but none witnessed the actual altercation. There were no current protective orders between Shaterica and Tracy, nor were there any publicly available records of past domestic abuse at the address. However, police did not rule out the existence of unreported or undocumented prior conflicts between the pair. Law enforcement officials were careful to note that although the evidence strongly suggested a domestic violence incident that ended in murder-suicide, the investigation remained active. Autopsy reports, ballistic testing, and detailed forensic analysis were still pending. The recovered firearm was sent to a lab for processing as part of routine protocol in homicide cases. Later that same day, the Alexandria Police Department formally released the names of the deceased. It issued a public appeal for anyone with information to contact detectives or provide anonymous tips through Crime Stoppers of Cenla. Although the home was released from the immediate crime scene lockdown, investigators continued to monitor and review all relevant data. At the time of her death, no public employment or education records were available for Shaterica. She had no criminal history or active legal cases, and her name had not been linked to any prior law enforcement incidents at the address. Emergency responders officially declared her dead at the scene, and her cause of death was confirmed as a gunshot wound. The man found alongside her, Tracy Johnson, was believed to have used the firearm recovered at the scene. The evidence suggested that after shooting Shaterica, he took his own life with the same weapon. Authorities have not identified any additional suspects, and no surveillance footage capturing the incident has been reported. The house showed no visible signs of forced entry, nor was there any evidence suggesting a physical confrontation took place prior to the gunfire. Investigators processed the home meticulously, collecting forensic data from all accessible rooms. As of now, no witness has stepped forward to offer a first-hand account of what transpired during those critical moments. Although Shaterica's memorial listing was posted on a digital obituary site, no formal statements have been made by her family, and no public obituary has been released to date. Additionally, there is no record of her being involved in local community programs or professional organizations, and her broader background remains largely unreported. Authorities have reiterated their call for public cooperation if anyone may have relevant information, whether about the couple's past or anything that might shed light on the days leading up to the shooting. The case remains under active investigation, with detectives awaiting final autopsy and lab results to complete the timeline of events. While the official cause of death and weapon ownership have been established, many questions still linger. Questions about motive, mental health, and whether any opportunity to prevent this tragedy was missed. For now, the story of Shaterica Danielle Smith and Tracy Johnson stands as a solemn reminder of how domestic situations can spiral into irreversible outcomes, often without warning. Tracy Johnson, 42 years old, was identified as the male found deceased alongside 38-year-old Shaterica Danielle Smith in a home located on Ronmar Drive in Alexandria, Louisiana. Police determined that Johnson died from a self-inflicted gunshot wound and named him the suspected shooter in what authorities are treating as a probable murder-suicide. While officials did not formally classify the relationship between Johnson and Smith as marital or cohabiting, the context of the call and shared living arrangements suggest they were involved in a close personal relationship. Investigators indicated there were no active protective orders, police reports, or documented incidents of domestic disputes between the two prior to the fatal event. The nature of their connection remains under review, but available evidence places the two in a domestic setting with no outward signs of previously reported conflict. Ballistics testing linked the firearm recovered at the scene to both deaths. The physical evidence at the residence, including body placement and gunshot trajectory, suggested that Shaterica was shot first, with Johnson turning the gun on himself moments later. There were no signs of forced entry or indications of another party being present during the incident. Law enforcement determined early on that this was a self-contained event involving only the two deceased individuals. Forensic technicians and investigators agreed that the crime scene supported the theory of a murder-suicide based on the initial autopsy results, ballistics evidence, and the absence of any suspects beyond Johnson. The bodies were found in different parts of the home, reinforcing the conclusion that the shooter acted alone. As of the latest update, Tracy Johnson was officially held responsible for the shooting death of Shaterica Danielle Smith. Since no additional suspects are being pursued, no criminal proceedings will follow. Johnson's personal background, including employment or criminal records, has not been made public. Authorities reported no ongoing legal disputes or public altercations between him and Smith leading up to the event. However, detectives are continuing to explore possible motives by reviewing digital evidence, such as text conversations, call logs, and smartphone activity to gain insight into the couple's recent communications. As of now, no clear motive has been confirmed, and no suicide note or written message was discovered at the scene. Mental health concerns, financial difficulties, or relationship stressors remain possible factors but have not yet been validated. Police continue to build a timeline of events based on forensic data and electronic records. While Tracy Johnson has been conclusively identified as the shooter, detectives are working to understand what led up to the violence in hopes of offering clarity on an otherwise silent case. In the early hours of March 30th, 2025, at approximately 4:35 a.m., a 911 call alerted police to suspected gunfire at a residence in the 5900 block of Ronmar Drive. Responding officers entered the home and found both individuals dead from apparent gunshot wounds. Crime scene specialists arrived shortly afterward to conduct a full forensic analysis of the premises. Shaterica Danielle Smith was found with a gunshot wound to the upper torso, while Tracy Johnson's body was discovered in a different room with what appeared to be a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. A handgun was found near his body, and preliminary ballistics tests confirmed it had been used in both shootings. The weapon was legally owned by Johnson. No other firearms were found inside the house. There were no signs that the residence had been broken into, and the home's interior showed no damage or disarray. Furniture and belongings were undisturbed, and forensic experts confirmed there were no indicators of a physical altercation. Gunshot residue was detected on Johnson's hands, and shell casings found on the scene matched the caliber of the firearm recovered. Autopsies were performed by the Rapides Parish Coroner's Office. Shaterica's cause of death was determined to be a gunshot wound delivered at close range to her chest. Johnson's death was confirmed as a suicide by gunshot to the head. The estimated time of death for both individuals placed the shootings within a narrow window, just minutes apart. Officers collected digital devices for further review and surveyed security camera footage from neighboring homes. No footage showed any third party entering or leaving the property during the relevant time frame. Call and text data from both victims' phones showed no external threats or suspicious conversations prior to the event. Again, no suicide note was found at the scene. Initial reports from neighbors painted a picture of relative quiet leading up to the tragedy. Some residents mentioned hearing arguing in the early hours of the morning, shortly followed by what they believed were gunshots. One neighbor, whose identity has not been disclosed, was the individual who placed the emergency call. While no one witnessed the events directly, some neighbors acknowledged hearing raised voices on prior occasions, though nothing had ever been considered severe enough to report. No police calls had been placed to the residence before March 30th, and there was no public record of prior domestic violence or disturbances associated with either individual. The lack of visible signs or reported tension suggests that if conflict existed, it was largely kept private. Authorities have confirmed that the deaths of Shaterica Smith and Tracy Johnson are being treated as a domestic-related murder-suicide. Although the police have not specified whether they were legally married or living together, the evidence indicates they shared the home where the shootings occurred. Interviews with residents and community members revealed no significant behavioral changes or signs of distress in either person leading up to the event. Because no note or clear message was left behind, investigators have shifted their attention to digital footprints. Phones, computers, and social media accounts are being examined to identify potential motives, emotional cues, or outside influences. So far, these efforts have not yielded any explanations. No civil cases, legal battles, or protective orders have been uncovered through public databases. Authorities are considering multiple factors that may have contributed to the shooting, ranging from emotional distress to unresolved relationship issues, but none have been definitively confirmed. No witnesses reported prior physical abuse or public altercations, further complicating attempts to establish motive. The scene showed no evidence of a break-in or struggle, and the crime was confined entirely within the home. The positioning of the firearm near Johnson's body and supporting forensic results indicate that he acted alone. There are no leads or suggestions of an accomplice or external individual being involved. Law enforcement continues to treat the event as an isolated domestic tragedy, and unless new evidence emerges, Tracy Johnson will remain the only individual implicated in the shooting death of Shaterica Danielle Smith. The investigation is ongoing, but current findings support the conclusion that this was a private, self-contained incident with devastating consequences. Authorities have not publicly shared in-depth results from their forensic or digital investigations. However, they confirmed that the positioning of the wounds and bullet trajectories supported the current ruling of the case. No valuables appeared to be taken, and there were no indications of forced access to the home. As of now, the motive behind the event remains uncertain, largely due to the absence of first-hand witnesses and the lack of any note, text, or digital file explaining Tracy Johnson's reasoning. Investigators are still working through data to establish what may have triggered the deadly event. The Alexandria Police Department continues to encourage the public to come forward with any knowledge that might help clarify the nature of the relationship or the events leading up to the incident. The investigation is still open, awaiting final autopsy reports and a full forensic and digital analysis. Following the discovery of 38-year-old Shaterica Danielle Smith and 42-year-old Tracy Johnson's bodies, Alexandria police classified the event as a likely murder-suicide. A handgun was recovered near Johnson's body, and no other individuals were reported in or around the property at the time officers arrived. Evidence at the scene aligned with a scenario in which Shaterica was shot, and Johnson then turned the weapon on himself. The coroner's office later confirmed this sequence through autopsy results. Shaterica's fatal injury was the result of a gunshot, while Johnson's wounds were consistent with suicide by firearm. There were no visible signs of forced entry or a struggle inside the residence. After securing the home, forensic teams processed the scene and collected firearm residue, fingerprints, and digital devices for examination. As of the most recent updates, there was no indication of another person being involved. No farewell note or message was found, and law enforcement did not release any communication, such as emails or messages, that might suggest prior planning or intent. Authorities reviewed both victims' phone and social media activity, hoping to discover emotional shifts or troubling signs, but no clear explanations were made public. No domestic calls or formal complaints had been made to law enforcement involving either individual prior to the shooting. This lack of documented history limited investigators' ability to identify a behavioral pattern that might have preceded the tragedy. Police interviewed people close to both Shaterica and Tracy, including neighbors, relatives, and friends, but none provided statements suggesting repeated violence or overt threats. Officials emphasized that, although no suspects are being pursued, the case remains open to new details. Community members were once again urged to reach out with any information about the pair's dynamic or warning signs that may have emerged before the fatal event. Police also provided anonymous reporting options through Crime Stoppers of Senla. As of now, no public statement has revealed what may have led to the deadly encounter. With no written admission, digital confession, or credible eyewitness account, the specific cause remains officially unknown. Law enforcement has labeled the case as resolved, with no charges expected, given that both individuals involved are deceased. Still, it is considered archived rather than closed, subject to re-examination should any new and verifiable evidence surface in the future. This tragic event echoes a broader and troubling pattern seen across the United States, where intimate partner violence can escalate without warning into fatal acts. According to national research by the Violence Policy Center, most murder-suicides involve romantic or domestic partners, and women are most often the victims. These incidents typically take place within the home and frequently involve firearms. Louisiana, in particular, continues to rank high in states where women are killed by men in domestic settings. Within the state, Rapides Parish, home to Alexandria, has consistently reported high rates of domestic-related violence. In 2024 alone, over 30% of reported violent crimes in the parish were linked to domestic issues. These local statistics reflect a troubling nationwide trend, emphasizing that intimate partner violence is both widespread and underreported. In many of these cases, warning signs may be present, but go unnoticed or unreported. Behaviors such as excessive control, emotional intimidation, verbal threats, or psychological abuse often go undocumented. In the situation involving Smith and Johnson, the absence of official records, no criminal charges, no restraining orders, no prior police calls, suggests that any tension between them remained hidden from public view. The Alexandria Police Department officially labeled the case a murder-suicide based on the findings at the scene. Investigators ruled out any outside involvement and confirmed that the residence had not been previously flagged for domestic disturbances. Such silence leading up to tragedy is sadly common in many similar cases, particularly when victims feel they cannot safely seek help. There has been little public activity in response to the deaths. No major memorial events or public gatherings have been reported. However, tributes and online posts in Shaterica Smith's memory have appeared on digital obituary platforms. There were no formal community-led vigils or protests documented in the aftermath. The use of a firearm in this case highlights a broader concern in cases involving domestic abuse. Access to weapons increases the likelihood of a lethal outcome. Despite ongoing advocacy for stricter gun laws and emergency protective measures like red flag legislation, enforcement remains inconsistent, particularly in private, non-publicized relationships. Law enforcement agencies and domestic violence advocates continue to stress the importance of early recognition and intervention. Community education efforts focus on helping individuals recognize signs of abuse, even in the absence of physical violence. These include isolation, jealousy, verbal degradation, and controlling behavior. However, in cases like Smith and Johnson's, when no prior warning signs reach authorities, the potential to intervene is minimal. That wraps up today's case. At True Crime's Venue, we uncover the truth, honor the unheard, and keep their stories alive. If this case moved you, more powerful stories are on the way. Be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's next. And before you go, share in the comments what struck you most. Don't forget to visit our well-curated playlist for more true crime stories. The link is in the description. Until next time, stay safe, stay alert, and remember, justice begins with truth. True Crime's Venue, where every story has a voice.